Welcome to Chapter 10, Rope Rescue Systems. In this chapter, we'll explore the essential principles and practices that form the foundation of safe and effective rope rescue operations. Rope rescue is about more than just ropes and hardware. It's about understanding forces, vectors, angles, and tension, and how all of these interact in a real-world rescue scenario. Throughout this chapter, we'll cover critical topics including the basic physics of rope rescue systems, including forces and vectors, identifying fall lines and understanding how they influence the system, calculating safety factors to ensure system reliability under both static and dynamic loads, different rope systems and techniques, including single rope and dual rope systems, redundant systems, including dual-tensioned and two-tensioned rescue systems, optimizing force to safely move rescuers and victims. Asterisk. By the end of this chapter, you should be able to analyze a rope rescue system at a glance, identify potential weaknesses, and apply fundamental principles to create a safe, effective, and efficient rigging plan. Let's begin by reviewing the basic concepts of forces and vectors, which are the building blocks for everything that follows in rope rescue. Before we dive in, let's set the stage. Rigging a rope rescue system isn't just about tying knots or throwing ropes over edges. It's about thinking, analyzing, and making smart decisions. First off, here's a quick look at what you'll get out of this chapter. You'll understand the basic forces at play in a rope system. You'll learn how different pieces of equipment work together. And you'll get a framework to plan and adjust your systems safely in the field. Now, here's the good news. You don't need to be an engineer to be a great rescue rigger. That said, a little understanding of forces and motion goes a long way. Knowing how weight, friction, and energy interact helps you build systems that are both safe and efficient. Rope systems used in rescues, we usually call them rope rescue systems, should always be set up back from the edge. Give yourself some room to operate safely. Nobody wants to be hanging off the edge trying to figure out if the rope is set right. Here's a mantra I want you to remember. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Rushing is how mistakes happen. Move deliberately, think through your actions, and trust your training. And here's a handy tool to help you stay on track: pace. Think of it like a cheat sheet for your brain when the action starts. P. Primary plan. This is your main plan, the one you expect to work. An alternate plan. What's your backup if the primary fails? C. Contingency plan. Plan C, for when A and P aren't enough. E. Emergency plan. The last line of defense to protect yourself and the team. Follow pace, and suddenly everything seems more manageable. You'll be safer, calmer, and more confident. So the key takeaway here? Take your time, know your system, and think ahead. Slow and smooth wins every time. Alright, let's talk forces. Don't worry, we're not launching rockets here. Just getting comfortable with the basics that keep our rope systems safe. So what is force? Simply put, it's the push or pull an object experiences because of its interaction with something else. Think about it this way. If you're tugging on a rope, the rope is experiencing a force from your pull. And the object on the other end? Yep, it's also experiencing a force. Force is all about relationships. It only exists when two things interact. Take away one, and poof, the force disappears. Now here's where people get tripped up. Mass versus weight. Mass is just how much stuff is in an object. It doesn't care where you are in the universe, Earth, the Moon, or Mars. Mass is mass. Weight, on the other hand, is the effect of gravity acting on that mass. It's what makes you feel heavier on Earth than on the Moon. Here's a quick tip. The difference between mass and weight is one of the reasons metric units are a lot easier for calculating forces. Metric keeps things clean and avoids confusion. That said, for most rope rescue work near the Earth's surface, we can kind of use mass and weight interchangeably. Just remember, weight equals mass times gravity. Gravity's always sneaky, so don't forget it. So, when you're rigging a system and thinking about how much pull or tension a rope will face, remember, it's all about the forces acting on it, and knowing the difference between mass and weight helps you make smarter, safer decisions. And hey, why did the physics teacher break up with the rope? Because it couldn't handle the tension. Alright, let's talk about gravity. That invisible force or phenomenon that's always working, whether we notice it or not. Understanding gravity is crucial for rigging safe rope systems because it's one of the main forces acting on our loads. First, a quick clarification. Mass is how much stuff is in an object. That doesn't change no matter where the object is, Earth, Moon, or Mars. Gravity is what pulls that mass toward another object, usually toward the Earth in rope rescue. Technically, gravity is a phenomenon, not a force, but when it pulls a rescuer or a load toward the ground, we treat it as a force for our calculations. Gravity pulls objects toward the Earth at a constant rate, which is great for us. Predictable forces are much easier to plan for than unpredictable ones. The tension created in a rope from a dangling rescue load, for example, is largely determined by gravity, unless some other force comes into play. We can calculate that force with this equation. Gravity force, or weight, equals 9.8 newtons per kilogram times mass of the object in kilograms. So a 70-kilogram rescuer hanging on a rope, 70 times 9.8, is equal to 686 newtons. That's the force the rope and system must support. Pretty neat, right? It's like a constant invisible friend who's always there, making your rescue predictable. But keep in mind, other forces can influence our system. Friction between the rope and anchors. Tension applied when we pull a load. Contact with obstacles or uneven surfaces. These forces are more variable and harder to predict, but they're just as important to consider in your analysis. Here's a practical scenario. You're hauling a victim up a cliff. Gravity is pulling downward. You pull on your rope. The harder you pull, the faster the load moves up. If friction from the edge or other obstacles increases, you need more effort. The system's tension goes up, and so does the load on your anchors. Now let's talk weight versus mass and why units matter. Pounds and kilograms measure weight, the effect of gravity on mass. Newtons measure force, how much force it takes to accelerate 1 kilogram at 1 meter per second squared. In rescue, impact loads on rope and braking strength of equipment are often expressed in kilonewtons. In English units, that's pounds force. For reference, a 1 newton equals 0.225 lbf. 1 kilonewton, 1,000 newtons, equals 225 pounds force. Most standards for high-angle rescue use the International System of Units, SI, which keeps things consistent worldwide. Tip: even though we're in the US, where pounds and feet are common, it's good to understand SI units. Many manuals, including NFPA, IRATA, and CMC rope manuals, reference newtons and kilonewtons. Plus, converting is easier than you might think. Just remember 1 kilonewton is almost equal to 225 pounds force. Finally, a quick rescue tip. Predictability is your friend. Gravity is constant. The other forces are variable. Plan your rigging knowing that every pull, swing, or friction point adds tension. Treat gravity like a steady teammate, not an enemy, and your systems will be safer and more efficient. And if all else fails, remember, gravity is the only thing that never takes a coffee break.
Let's talk vectors. And no, I don't mean mosquitoes. These vectors are much more helpful in a rescue. In rope rescue, a vector is just a way to describe the direction and strength of a force. Simple enough, right? Direction equals where the force is going. A magnitude equals how strong it is. Imagine giving your buddy a gentle tug on a rope versus trying to pull a stuck truck out of the mud. Same type of force, very different magnitude. Here's the cool part. Every force has a vector. Even if you're just rigging a rope to a simple anchor, there's a direction and a magnitude acting on it. Some folks only think about vectors for fancy setups, like high lines or complex high directionals. But honestly, vectors are everywhere. Recognizing them now will make everything else easier as things get more complex. So here's the question you should keep asking yourself on every rescue. What vectors are acting on this system right now? Why? Because knowing your vectors lets you design the system intentionally, not just throw rope and hope. Counteract forces that might otherwise mess with your rescue. Get the load where it needs to go safely. Take a high line, for example. You've got a load moving across a chasm. 1. Gravity pulls it down, that's one vector. 2. The two anchors holding the line create vectors that oppose gravity and keep the load stable. 3. Then you add a haul line vector to actually move the load across. It's like invisible arrows pushing and pulling, all working together. And if you understand the vectors, you can predict how the system will behave, which makes everyone safer. So next time you rig, don't just look at the rope or the anchor. Look at the vectors in play. They'll tell you if your system is solid or if you need to make adjustments before something goes sideways. When talking about rigging, You've probably heard the term resultant. Sounds fancy, but it's really just a way to describe what happens when multiple forces, or vectors, work together. Think of it like this. Every force has a direction and strength. Every time you add forces together, whether it's a simple straight line system or a more complex high directional, those forces combine into a single force called the resultant. Even in a simple straight line rig, the net force acting on the load is the sum of all the individual vectors. That sum is your resultant. So why do we care? Because understanding the resultant helps us predict how the load will move, how much tension is on each rope, and whether our anchors are being loaded safely. Basically, you're not just guessing, you're letting physics do the math for you. Remember, every time forces interact, there's a resultant. In complex rigging, this is crucial. In simple rigging, it's still important. Ignoring it is like trying to drive while blindfolded. Maybe fun in a video game, not so much in real life. Let's talk about angles. Now, don't worry, we're not doing trigonometry homework here, but angles play a huge role in rope rescue. An angle is simply the measure of difference in direction between two lines at the point where they meet. In our world, that's usually where ropes come together, at an anchor, or where a rope bends around a pulley. Here's the key: an angle itself isn't a force, but it changes the direction in which a force is acting, which means it creates a new vector. Whenever two vectors meet at an angle, a new resultant vector is born. It's like magic, but backed by physics. Angles can be your friend. Managed properly, they help you redirect a load, create mechanical advantage, and spread out forces across anchors. They're the invisible helpers that keep your system balanced and safe. For example, say you have a lowering system with a rope in a straight line from the anchor to the load. Sometimes, that straight line isn't practical. Maybe there's a rock, a ledge, or some other obstacle. By adding a pulley partway down the line, you change the path. Above the pulley, the rope creates one vector. Below the pulley, it creates a second. And the pulley itself? It now has a third vector acting on it. Each vector affects the others, changing the direction and magnitude of forces in the system. So, whenever you see an angle in a rig, don't panic. Think of it as an opportunity to manage forces, control the load, and set up a system that works for you, not against you. Now, let's talk about tension and compression. These are two fundamental forces you'll deal with in almost every rope rescue system. Don't worry, it's simpler than it sounds. Tension is the stress in a system or component that comes from forces pulling in equal and opposite directions. Think of it like a tug of war. The rope, webbing, or anchor point feels the pull from both sides. The amount of tension is basically the weight of the object you're supporting, plus any extra push or pull from acceleration. If your load is just hanging there at rest, the tension in the rope equals the weight of the load. And because tension acts equally and oppositely along the rope, that's why we sometimes call ropes and similar equipment tension members. Tension isn't always just a straight line. You can have forces applied in multiple directions at once. Your system is constantly juggling vectors. Now, compression is the opposite of tension. It's a pushing force rather than a pulling force. You might not think you see it often in rescue systems, but it's there. For example, when a tripod anchor sits on the ground, the legs experience compression as the weight of the system pushes down. Or when a rope runs over an edge roller, the roller gets pressed into the edge. That's compression at work. So, tension pulls, compression pushes, and understanding both helps you design systems that are safe, predictable, and efficient. Remember, your rope wants to pull, your tripod wants to push. You just have to manage both. Let's move on to friction, a force you're probably familiar with, whether you know it or not. Friction is basically an object's resistance to movement. It's what keeps your boots from sliding down a steep cliff, and sometimes what makes pulling a load feel like a full-body workout. Friction can be described mathematically, but don't worry, we're not going to pull out any calculus here. The formula takes into account two things: the force pressing the objects together and the force resisting movement. And the static coefficient of friction is what determines how hard it is to get something moving from rest. Think of it like trying to start sliding a heavy box across a carpet. The dynamic or kinetic coefficient of friction is what you're working against once the object is already moving. It's usually a little easier than getting it started. In a rope rescue system, friction depends on a few things: the type of surfaces in contact, how rough they are, whether they're wet, and how hard the rope is pressed against the surface. More friction can slow a load or even damage equipment if it's not accounted for. So recognizing it is key. You don't need to calculate it exactly, but understanding its effect can save your bacon on a rescue. Now, friction is everywhere in rope rescue. Between the rope and the anchor, between the load and the surface it rests on, even between you and the ground when you're pulling or lowering a load. Essentially, you're juggling tension, compression, and friction all at the same time. The good news is friction can be your friend. For example, it helps lower a load safely, giving you more control. The bad news is it works against you when you're trying to raise a load. It makes the work harder. As a rough rule of thumb, friction can amplify the effects of a load by about 2.5 times. So next time your load doesn't budge easily, remember, friction isn't your enemy. It's just an honest force with an opinion. Next up, let's talk about edge protection. This is one of those things that can save your rope and your operation from unnecessary wear or even failure. Simply put, any time a rope could be damaged by an edge, it needs protection. Every team that uses rope should carry some form of edge protection equipment. You never know when that sharp rock, metal beam, or concrete corner might turn your rope into confetti if you're not careful. There are a few simple and inexpensive ways to protect your rope. These work especially well for fixed ropes, like rappel lines. First, heavy-duty canvas pads. Typically made of natural fiber canvas, like cotton. This is preferred if the rope might move because synthetic fibers can melt from frictional heat. Usually, these are twice-folded squares of canvas, stitched along the edges to prevent fraying, sometimes cross-stitched for extra durability. Some even have grommets for securing them in place. Second, sections of discarded fire hose. Older hoses were made with a cotton jacket over a rubber core. By slitting the hose lengthwise, you could create a secure pad. The rubber side goes against the edge, the rope rides over the cotton jacket. Minimal slipping, and it's surprisingly effective. Modern hoses now use synthetic jackets, but even these can serve as decent rope sleeves for stationary lines. The key takeaway here: don't let your rope go over an edge unprotected. A little prep can prevent a lot of headaches and keep your rope in service longer. Let's talk about rope sleeves, another great way to protect ropes from abrasion, especially when they're stationary. One of the simplest and most effective options is a fire hose rope sleeve. Here's how you can make one. 1. First, split the hose down the center. This creates a channel for the rope to sit in. 2. Next, to keep the rope from slipping out, secure the edges with snaps or Velcro. 3. Then, put a hole or grommet at each end of the hose so you can anchor it in place. This prevents the sleeve from sliding down the rope. These sleeves aren't just DIY, they're also available commercially, often made from ballistic cloth, other fabrics, or even metal. The key idea is that a rope sleeve wraps completely around the rope, offering protection wherever it touches potentially damaging surfaces. Most fabric sleeves use hook and loop closures, and some include grommets and a small cord to anchor the sleeve to the rope. This is especially useful midline, where the rope might rub against an abrasive edge or structure. Think of a rope sleeve as a little coat for your rope, keeping it safe when the going gets rough. Now let's move on to plastic edge pads and aluminum edge guards. 2 more options for protecting your rope from damage. Starting with plastic edge pads. These aren't as flexible as fabric pads, but they do conform somewhat to the surface they're protecting, and they offer durable protection. Most plastic edge pads can be used with stationary or moving ropes, giving you some versatility on the scene. Some designs are even modular, meaning you can adjust them to fit the surface or situation. Next, we have aluminum edge guards. These are an excellent choice for either stationary or moving ropes. They come in various designs. Some conform to a variable surface, while others are perfect for protecting a sharp 90-degree edge. Many aluminum edge guards include moving rollers along the rope path to reduce friction, though some are fixed. Here a key safety point: all edge guards must be firmly secured. You don't want them moving or worse, dropping during a rescue. Think of aluminum guards as the luxury SUV of edge protection. They handle the tough spots with ease and make sure your rope stays safe. Let's talk about metallic edge rollers, which are an efficient and effective way to reduce friction when your rope runs over an edge. They make moving heavy loads over sharp or abrasive edges much easier on the rope and on the team. But they aren't without downsides. Some rollers may tip over if they aren't anchored carefully. And, as you might guess, they are more expensive than soft, fabric-based protection. Think of them like the sports car of edge protection. Super efficient, but you need to park it right or it might tip over. Now, metallic edge rollers come in a few different types, each with its own specialty. Single-unit rollers. These usually have 2 rollers set in a frame. Most systems require 2 or more units for proper protection. They need to be anchored to stay stable, but once stabilized, they perform well on regular surfaces like roofs or man-made edges. Some designs have 3 linked units with aluminum side plates and 2 roller bars each, which can be separated for long, gradual edges or linked for sharp breakovers. Roof rollers. Specifically designed for sharp 90-degree edges, like building corners. It consists of 2 rollers in a 90-degree frame, perfect for rooftops or other sharp angles. Roll modules. These have rollers on the sides and bottom, so if they tip over, they still protect the rope. Multiple modules can be linked together to conform to a variety of surfaces. Commercial, purpose-built devices. Some professionals prefer ready-made rope protection devices. While soft edge pads work for stationary ropes, rollers are the clear choice when ropes are being dragged over edges. And if no pre-made edge protection is available, you can improvise with packs, turnout coats, clothing, blankets, or even carpet squares. Finally, artificial high directionals can also help protect ropes from abrasion, giving you another layer of safety for tricky setups. Let's talk about the fall line. It's actually a pretty simple idea, but it's crucial for rigging safely. Think of it like this: if you dropped a ball on a slope, the path it would roll down? That's the fall line. It's influenced by things like gravity, friction, and obstacles. And in rope rescue, it tells us a lot about the forces that will act on the rope and the system. When you're planning a rigging setup, always consider the fall line. It helps you decide where to place anchors and how to plan the load path so the forces don't surprise you. Remember, the direction of pull matters. It's one of the main ways vectors shape the system, just like we've been talking about. Here's the takeaway. Everything we've covered, tension, angles, friction, edge protection, works together. If you know the fall line, you can look at a system and quickly spot problems before they happen. Think of it as reading the natural flow of the terrain. The rope wants to follow that path unless you plan otherwise. Bottom line, a good rescuer always thinks about where the load wants to go. The fall line tells you so you can control it. Let's talk about safety factors. Basically, this is all about knowing your system's limits. First, you need to identify the weakest point in the system. Every rope, knot, and piece of gear has one. That's where the math starts. Then, compare that weakest point to the maximum anticipated load it will see. That's your safety check. Think of load ratio like this. It's the difference between what the gear can handle and what you're actually asking it to do. If the gear is rated much higher than the expected load, your safety factor is good. If it's close, you've got a problem. And that's where things like force multipliers come into play. They can change the actual forces in the system, so you need to plan accordingly. Here's the basic formula you can use. System safety factor equals S/L. AS is the strength of the weakest point. RL is the maximum anticipated load. Pretty simple, but it's a powerful tool for keeping everyone safe. Now, let's break this down a bit more. Not all safety factors are created equal. There's component safety and system safety. A component safety factor looks at an individual piece of gear. For example, an NFPA 1983G rated rope must handle at least 40 kN. If our rescue load is about 600 pounds, that's a safety factor of around 15:1. Pretty strong, right? But here's the catch. When we tie a knot like a figure eight, we reduce that strength. A 30% reduction isn't unusual, which brings our 40 kN rope down to about 28 kN. And now, if that knot is the weakest point in the system, our system safety factor drops to something closer to 10.5:1. still safe but less forgiving. The key takeaway: always consider the forces that could actually happen during operation, not just the static load. Loads can spike, especially if there's movement, shock, or failure. That's why safety factors should always be a prime consideration when building a rope rescue system. Build it strong, anticipate the worst, and you'll keep your team safe. Let's talk about rope systems. Basically, any rope system we set up in rescue is there to get the job done safely and efficiently. First up, the fixed rope rescue system. In a fixed rope system, the ropes don't move. They're anchored in place, and the rescuer uses the rope to ascend or descend. Think of it like a permanent line up or down a cliff, or along a building. Anchors are critical. You want the anchor set back from the edge so the rescuer has a safe space to rig, clip in, or de-rig without being in danger. An important rule: one user at a time. These systems are designed for controlled, single-person access. That keeps it safe and manageable. Even though only one person uses it at a time, a fixed rope system is excellent for getting rescuers to and from a rescue site safely. It's simple, effective, and reliable when set up correctly. Now that we've talked about fixed rope systems, let's move on to rope techniques, the ways we actually use ropes in rescue. First, there's the single rope technique, or SRT. Here, all attachments are made to a single rope. It's simple, efficient, and often used when the rescue scenario is straightforward and the team is trained and confident in using a single line. Next, we have dual rope systems. With dual ropes, one rope is used for the primary access, the rescuer or load, and the other is a backup or safety line. Both single and dual rope systems are completely valid, but the choice depends on the training and skill level of your team, the goals of the system, and the likelihood of equipment failure. Always match your system to the scenario. Now let's talk about moving rope systems. These are a bit different. In a moving rope system, the rope actually moves to raise or lower a load. This is usually the type of system we use for real rescues because the person being rescued often can't ascend or descend on their own. Whenever we're running a moving rope system, we typically have a second system acting as a belay. This adds an extra layer of safety in case something goes wrong. Sometimes, a moving rope system can even serve as a belay for someone moving along the ground or on a fixed rope system. It's flexible, dynamic, and essential for effective rescue operations. One of the most important concepts in rope rescue is redundancy. In a rope system, you don't ever want the failure of a single point to result in a catastrophic failure of the entire system. That's where dual-tensioned rope systems, or mirrored rope system, come in. So, what makes a dual-tensioned rope system special? First, it's built with redundancy in mind. That means there's always a backup in place. One way to add redundancy is with a backup belay system. Even if the primary line fails, the belay system is there to catch the load. Another method is to use two separate lowering lines. Each line shares a portion of the load, but each one also backs up the other. In short, a dual-tensioned rope systems is all about planning for failure before it happens. It's a system designed to protect both the rescuers and the subjects, giving you a safe, reliable way to move a load even in challenging conditions. When we talk about optimizing force, we're really talking about thinking critically about how every pound of pull or push in your system behaves. First, force isn't just a number. It's a vector, which means it has both direction and magnitude. That's important because it tells you where the rope is pulling and how hard. Second, there are all kinds of external influences that can change how that force acts. Things like friction at edges or anchors. Angles in the system that can multiply or reduce force. The fall line. Remember how a load naturally wants to move downhill. Multiple vectors acting together, which can either help or hurt your system. When you put all of this together, it's not just theory. It's practical. A good rescuer constantly analyzes these forces while setting up or adjusting the system. Once you understand how the forces interact, you can make informed decisions about which vectors to adjust to get the smoothest, safest result. Think of it like tuning an instrument. Every line, anchor, and pulley can be adjusted so the system performs exactly as intended without overloading any single component. Alright, let's wrap up what we've covered in this chapter so far. First and foremost, before you ever touch a rope rescue system, You need a solid understanding of forces and how they interact. Think of this like knowing the rules of the game before stepping onto the field. And remember that a vector is just a fancy way of saying a force has both direction and magnitude. Every force you deal with has a vector, and when multiple forces act together, they combine to make a resultant vector. Angles matter. In rope rescue, we care most about where vectors meet. Those intersection points are where tension can spike or be redirected. A tension is what's created in the rope when forces pull against each other. Basically, it's the weight of the object times gravity, plus or minus any acceleration forces. That's why we always plan for more than just the static weight. A friction resists motion. Picture your rope sliding over the edge of a cliff. Friction is what slows it down and can create extra heat or wear. The fall line is exactly what it sounds like. The path a ball would take rolling downhill. In rescue, it tells you which way the forces want to go naturally. In identifying the weakest point in a system is critical. You have to evaluate it against the maximum load and consider all force multipliers, adjusting knots, anchor points, or gear as needed. A system choices. O single rope technique, SRT all attachments on one rope. O dual rope system. One rope for access, another for backup. Both work, but selection depends on training, system goals, and equipment reliability. Key takeaway. Forces are dynamic, systems are complex, and a thoughtful rescuer is always analyzing, adjusting, and planning.
Yeah, okay. I'll do what you're saying.